Hey guys, welcome back to another video in the r/entitledparents subreddit. Today I have one entitled parent story for you, and I must warn you, it's absolutely rage-inducing. Narcissistic, self-centered, keeping up with the Jones type people like the ones in this story are the reasons I stay inside. How I ruined 2013 Thanksgiving by getting mad at entitled kid for deliberately hitting me with a wooden chair. So this all happened 7 years ago when I was a 16-year-old boy. It was Thanksgiving and the family was going to get together for it. But the majority of people going to the party was a part of my stepmom's family, and her entire family, including herself, happened to be the most narcissistic folk you would ever know in your life. They could accidentally give you a serious injury and still somehow make it your fault. My dad wasn't any better, honestly. All he ever cared about was women and his reputation. I used to lie to save his reputation, but I'm not hiding it anymore. Anyways, my dad, my stepmom, my stepbrother, and I all got ready and started heading over to my stepmom's parents' house. And on the way, they both gave me and my stepbrother a lecture on being on your best behavior, and we will take you home if you ruin this day. I was honestly not at all interested in going to this party. I knew that I'm the only teen there, so there isn't anyone my age to socialize with, and trying to socialize with a bunch of narcissists is like trying to find the edge of a sphere. Also, there was a specific person who was gonna be there. A sadistic 8-year-old demon child we would call Tyrant, because his real name honestly sounded very close to that. Tyrant is literally the ideal nightmare bully we all were scared of encountering when we were in elementary school. He would pick on others for his own amusement, get physical, kill bugs and rodents, and have a maniacal giggle as he did any of this. Worst of all, Tyrant's parents enabled this. They would excuse anything he did, no matter how bad it was, and say it's because he has a learning disability, and we should go easy on him. This I honestly had a hard time believing because I was born with a learning disability myself and high-functioning autism, so I just could not accept the thought that all of this was at fault of a learning disability. Now that I look back on it, he and his parents were very much like the Dursley family. When we arrived at the house, we were let in by my stepmom's dad, and the house was full of people. Some I know, and some I didn't know. I looked around and did not see Tyrant or his parents in sight, and got a little excited, thinking I wouldn't have to deal with the little devil. But before I could relax, my dad told me that I need to go to the children's room with my stepbrother. I paused for a moment and then asked him why I can't stay out in the living room, and he said, "The owner's rule is children go into the children's room, now go in there." I tried to rebel, telling him that I'm 16, I shouldn't be forced into a room full of kids way younger than me, but he got mad and threatened to take me home with no food. I honestly don't know why I didn't take that instead of staying, because it would have been a lot better than what is to come. But I was hungry and chose to stay. So I went to the children's room. The children's room was a small square-shaped room that had one couch, some toy bins, a children's wooden table and chairs, and a TV. There were at least 3 kids in there, one being the demon spawn himself, Tyrant, who is talking to his parents. His parents are just dropping him off into the room, telling him to be a good little angel, etc., and go to leave the room. As they're leaving, they don't even acknowledge my existence, nearly bumping into me as they approach the door. It boggles my mind how people are fine with being so rude, especially to those way younger than them. After they left the room, Tyrant let out an excited screech and went ballistic on the toy bins, throwing things out everywhere. I just sat there on the couch, trying to cancel out the inhumane noises made by this child, when I remembered that there is a TV in this room. I thought that maybe if I turned on some cartoons, that I would be able to calm him down. So I looked for the remote. I searched around the room and there was no remote to be found. After looking for it, I decided to leave the room to go ask my stepmom's parents if they knew where it was. When I got to them, I was greeted with a, "What are you doing out here?" and asked them if they knew where the remotes were. My stepmom's dad then told me that he took them away before we all got there so he can make the kids play together and not stare at a screen like zombies. They then told me to go back to the room, and my stepmom's mom followed me back. When I got back to the room, it was a mess. Tyrant managed to trash the entire room the one single minute I was gone. My stepmom's mom told me, "Since you're the oldest in here, I expect you to clean up after the kids. Thanks." But before I could even protest to that, she shut the door. I groaned in disappointment and went to go clean up the toys scattered all over. After cleaning it all up, I sat on the couch and closed my eyes, letting out a sigh in boredom. Then suddenly, I hear a loud bang. I look and see Tyrant throwing toys like an NFL quarterback. Some of the kids, including my stepbrother, move out of the way to dodge some of the flying action figures and blocks. I went out of the room and tried to get the attention of Tyrant's parents. When I got up to them, I tried to tell them what's happening, but they interrupt me saying, "No, you aren't allowed out here. Go back to the kids' room." Of course, me being the typical forcefully obedient teenager, I turned around and went back to the room, which again was a mess. Yet another round of cleaning up after another person's child. Hooray. Honestly, I can't believe back then why I never questioned why this 8-year-old was behaving like a 4-year-old, but I guess I already had the answer when I met his parents back then for the first time. Anyways, after cleaning up yet another mess, I tried to lay down on the couch. I thought that maybe if I got a little nap in, I was able to make this night go by faster. Tyrant started to calm down, so it was a perfect time. I started to doze off when I heard the sound of children arguing. I sit back up and see Tyrant pulling toys away from my stepbrother while saying, "It's mine." I intervened and told them to stop fighting. I pulled out some building blocks that I originally put away and suggested they play with these together. And they actually agreed. Thank God. An uneventful hour passes and I'm starting to wonder when the food will be done. I stand up to go ask the adults, but then I remember that they don't like me out there, so I peeked out the door. The adults were all at the table talking about various stuff and laughing over terrible jokes. I saw that no food was out on the table, so I assumed that it wasn't done cooking yet. Then I hear a loud smack sound. I turn around and see one of the kids crying, holding their cheek while Tyrant giggles in the corner. I asked him what happened and he told me that Tyrant hit him. I went over to Tyrant, who was still giggling like a pest, and tried to tell him what he did was wrong. But he interrupted me by saying, "You're not my dad," and went back to playing with toys. I was just standing there wondering what to do, seeing this little brat act like this and the other kid still holding his cheek and sniffling. I knew that going out of the room to tell his parents would make them mad, but I gave into it and went out anyways. Before they could tell me to go back to the room, I interrupted them and said, "No, you have to listen. Tyrant is hitting the other kids and making them cry." The entire table went silent. At that point, I thought I finally got their attention, but Tyrant's mom then said, "Why don't you do something about it then?" I told her that I in fact did, but he didn't listen to me. The adults were all mumbling to each other and Tyrant's dad then said, "You're old enough to know how to deal with this. Stop being a tattletale." I looked around to the other adults with a "is he serious?" face, but they all looked at me disappointingly. Even my dad, who looked red and angry at me. I said, "Fine," and went back to the room. I was done with the BS at this rate. Tyrant was being awful and the adults were not helping, so I thought to myself that if they wanted me to handle it, then fine, I will handle it my way. As I entered the room, I of course expected it to be a mess, but it was beyond that. The children's table was knocked over, puzzle pieces everywhere, and the kids trying to pick them up. I groaned, knowing exactly who did this, but I didn't see Tyrant. I looked around thinking he was hiding in a corner, but he was not in sight. Although it was odd he just vanished like that, I bent down onto my knees to pick up the table and help the kids pick up the puzzle pieces. That's when I hear that disturbing giggle. I pause, knowing whose giggle that was. I look up and then it happened. Tyrant swung a small wooden chair right into my face. The pain was so intense, I rolled backwards, my hand on my face, moaning in pain, trying to process what just happened. After the pain started to calm down, I get on one knee, looking at how Tyrant was giggling and holding the chair, as all the other kids stare in shock at him. That's when it all came to me. This little demon had planned this. He deliberately made a large mess, knowing I would bend down to clean it, so he would be able to hit me. At that point, all I felt was anger. I stood up glaring at Tyrant as he giggled. Then this kid had the audacity to go in for another strike, this time aiming for my stomach. But I grabbed the chair mid-swing, pulled it out of his hands and slammed it on the ground, and let out a loud, "Enough!" I said it so loud that it boomed through the entire house. Everything stopped. The kids, the noises, and even the adults talking. Uh-oh. Tyrant just stared at me surprised as I stood there still with anger, but then I hear loud stomping coming. The door swings open and it's my dad. He yells at me to come out of the room right now and to go talk with the adults. When I go out, I see that the adults were all staring at me like I just poisoned the water hole. My stepmom then said, "Why are you yelling at kids?" I tried to tell her, but I was interrupted by Tyrant's mom who said, "You have no reason to yell at kids." It was then I get lectured by each and every adult there at the same time, each talking over each other at me, telling me how awful and disrespectful I am. I started to cry and shouted at them to stop. I shouted that I yelled because Tyrant had hit me on the head with a chair. They all stopped and looked at each other, again thinking I finally got their attention, but I was wrong. Tyrant's mom spoke up and said, "But he's way shorter than you. How can he do that?" And before I could explain it, his dad says, "Even if he did, it can't hurt that bad. He's only 8. These morons have no idea what it feels like to be hit in the face with a chair. I snapped and told them that if they listened and let me speak, they would get it. I guess I said it in a really pissed off tone because the adults gasped and looked at me like I just killed someone. My dad then said, "That's it," stood up and grabbed me by the arm. He dragged me out into his car and started it. I asked him what he's doing and he told me, "Your attitude has ruined Thanksgiving for us. I'm taking you back home. You don't deserve to have Thanksgiving dinner." I didn't even want to argue with him. I was angry, sick of all the BS, and actually wanted to go home at that point. He drops me off back at home and he sped off in a hurry. There I was, home alone, where I made my Thanksgiving dinner, some soup and a grilled cheese. It was depressing, but it was a hell of a lot better than being stuck in that house with that demon spawn. The next day, I got the usual, "You're grounded for a month, and I'm taking your stuff away." But I didn't care. I was used to being punished regularly and treated like a troubled teen. But thankfully, all that ended when I finally got to move out in 2018. My dad did divorce my stepmom before that, but none of that mattered at the time because even though one problem was out of the house, there was still another. But now my life is not a part of his anymore. Now I'm a lot better and just recently had a great Thanksgiving with my friends and my grandma, and hope in the future I will continue to have good Thanksgivings. Jesus, it's funny that OP explained the family as being like the Dursleys, because when I started reading this, I thought to myself, is OP's bedroom in a tiny closet under the stairs? Either that or OP is Cinderella. Not to mention, OP has the patience and restraint of a saint. If this were me at 16, I would have left that room a destroyed mess, possibly even put a few holes in the wall. Heck, I maybe even would have hit that little future psychopath back with the chair. I'm kidding, maybe. But one thing that narcissists hate most is when they can't control somebody. So for the remaining years, I would have made my dad's and all those narcissistic people's lives an absolute nightmare by not listening or being compliant in the least. Send me to the ranch for all I care. I really do feel for OP though, because I went through something pretty similar, and when things like this happen, there's only two options. You either forgive or you cut contact, and it seems like OP's dad is the type that never apologizes because his ego and reputation matter more than his kid, so I'm glad that OP got to move out and cut contact and seemingly make a better life for himself. Anyways, that is all from me today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. I truly appreciate when you do, and I will see you in the next Reddit story. Bye!